The sheriff had his hand on his holster when he told me to step off my own porch. Behind him, Karen from the HOA was grinning like she'd just won a custody battle. I didn't flinch. I just sipped my coffee and told him to call the county commissioner, because I own the whole damn county. Back when I first bought the land, there wasn't a soul out here, just pine trees, red dirt, and a quiet lake that shimmered like polished steel in the morning light. I didn't buy it for the view. I bought it because it was the kind of silence I hadn't heard in years, the kind you only get when the closest paved road is 10 miles away and the cell signal dies somewhere near mile marker 6. The land wasn't anything special then. It didn't have roads, trails, or even a good clearing, just dense woods and wildness, but that was exactly what I wanted. I was still in boots and hard hat back then, working commercial development, putting up buildings I'd never step foot in again, and carving concrete where trees used to stand. That kind of work will hollow you out if you let it. So when I saw the listing for this forgotten patch of Georgia, I didn't even blink. I paid in full and didn't tell a soul, not even my wife, until the deal was done. I built the cabin myself, every single inch of it. No crews, no contractors, just me, a stack of lumber, and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Took me nearly 2 years between weekend trips, rainy setbacks, and more splinters than I care to admit. But when it was done, it was solid. The kind of solid that doesn't creak when the wind howls or leak when the sky dumps a bucket. I poured the foundation by hand, laid every board, carved the porch swing, even hauled in the old wood stove from a junk shop up in Athens and refurbished it in my garage. That cabin became more than a getaway. It became a part of me, a place where I could exhale without being reminded of schedules and site plans and committee meetings. It's where my wife and I came when life got too loud. It's where we'd sit on the porch with coffee at sunrise and bourbon at sunset. It's where she wanted to be when she got sick, and it's where I spread her ashes under the dogwood tree behind the house after she passed. After she was gone, I stayed. Retired, sold off the last of my contracts, and moved in full time. Folks thought I was crazy. "You're gonna live out there with no neighbors?" they'd ask. Damn right I was. That was the point. For years it stayed quiet. No traffic, no powerboats ripping across the water, just loons calling in the morning and the occasional deer wandering across the lawn. It was peace in the truest form, and I thought it would stay that way forever. But peace never lasts, not when developers catch wind of lakefront property that hasn't been monetized yet. About 5 years back, Cedar Ridge showed up. Some hotshot company out of Atlanta rolled in and started cutting trees and pouring driveways on the other side of the lake. High-end homes with stone arches and backyard fire pits. Little golf carts on private roads. One of those places where they sell you a dream wrapped in an HOA contract and call it a community. At first, I didn't care. Their homes were 3 miles up the shoreline and pointed away from my end. I figured if they wanted to play neighborhood, let them. I had no intention of joining their potlucks and wine nights. I wasn't even on the same power grid. But slowly they crept. A new house here, a new dock there. Pretty soon I started seeing headlights across the lake at night and hearing voices echo off the water. They paved a road right up to the ridgeline behind my trees and gave it a name, something fake sounding like Whispering Pines Drive. That's when I got curious and pulled out the old survey maps. My land didn't just sit next to them, it wrapped around them. See, what Karen and the rest of those folks didn't know was that over the years I'd been buying. Quietly, steadily. Every patch of land that came up for sale within a 5-mile radius, I made an offer. I didn't do it for power. I did it to keep the noise out. I wanted a buffer. I wanted control over what went up and what didn't. And over time, I ended up owning over 800 acres. That includes the only paved road in or out of Cedar Ridge. I checked the plats, I checked the zoning, triple-checked the deeds. My land never fell under their HOA. Never had, never would. I was just an old man on his own piece of dirt. But Karen? Karen had other plans. And she wasn't the kind of woman to let a little thing like facts get in her way. Thing is, people like her don't show their fangs right away. They smile first, shake your hand, maybe bake banana bread. But that's just the bait. Because when they realize they can't control you, they start looking for ways to erase you. And when that fails, they bring fire. The first time I realized something was off, it came folded in half and stuffed into my rural mailbox like junk mail. No return address. Just a plain white envelope with "to cabin occupant" typed in a font that screamed passive-aggressive middle management. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a misplaced flyer or one of those ridiculous lakefront newsletters about invasive cattails or turtle nesting season. But nope, it was a letter, official-looking, with a Cedar Ridge HOA letterhead and the signature of one Karen Langford, President, Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, written like she thought she was running for governor. It read, and I'm quoting from memory here, "Dear cabin occupant, As your residence falls within newly defined Cedar Ridge jurisdiction, you are now expected to comply with lakefront appearance standards and property access regulation. Please vacate and relocate personal structures that do not meet visual harmony requirements. Failure to comply will result in further action. I actually laughed out loud when I read it. Not a chuckle, not a smirk. I mean a real belly laugh that scared off the pair of blue jays fighting over a worm on my porch rail. I figured this had to be a joke. There was no world where my cabin, my land, had magically wandered into their jurisdiction like it was sleepwalking through red tape. My deeds were ironclad, my plats were surveyed twice, and I had the original zoning maps from before Cedar Ridge was even a sparkle in some developer's eye. Still, I didn't respond. I figured maybe they mailed it to the wrong address, or Karen had gotten a little ahead of herself with her gerrymandering fantasies. Either way, I wasn't interested in playing games. Let 'em huff and puff. My cabin wasn't going anywhere. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman who appreciated being ignored. A few days after the letter, I noticed a drone hovering about 20 feet above my dock. Black, no markings, humming like a mosquito with a grudge. I watched it for a while from the porch, coffee in hand, waiting for it to do something stupid. It didn't. Just floated there, recording, I assume, before zipping back toward the north tree line where the Cedar Ridge Ridge home started. Next day, I spotted two folks I didn't recognize walking along the edge of my property, late middle-aged, matching golden retrievers, both of them wearing Cedar Ridge caps and talking loudly about shoreline stewardship like they were narrating a brochure. They didn't cross the line, not exactly, but they lingered, looked around like they were sizing things up, and then the paper trail started. Not legal papers, mind you, just a slow drip of fake violations and flimsy warnings duct taped to my gate. Notice of noncompliance. Violation of community standards. Unpermitted dock extension. It was like they were printing these off a Word doc and hoping if they slapped enough of them on my fence, I'd get scared and move out. I didn't say a word. No calls, no emails, no Facebook rants. I didn't even bother pulling the notices down right away. I let them bake in the sun and curl at the edges, let them look ridiculous in the breeze. The way I saw it, if they were going to play pretend, I'd let them decorate their imaginary battlefield however they wanted. But that's the thing about people like Karen. They don't just want to push boundaries, they want you to push back so they can cry foul. And when you don't play the game, they up the stakes. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know how far she'd take it. Not yet. That first letter, though, that was her shot across the bow, and in hindsight, I should have taken it as a warning. Not because I was afraid of her, hell no, but because it meant one thing loud and clear. Karen had decided I was the problem, and she wasn't going to stop until she fixed it. Her way. It all started sliding downhill the weekend my family came up for Memorial Day. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. My daughter Sarah and her husband Chris were bringing the boys, Luke and Evan, up to the cabin for a few days of fishing, grilling, and just being unplugged for a change. I'd cleaned the dock, fixed the swing out front, even bought extra ribs to throw on the smoker. For a while, everything felt the way it used to. You know the feeling, sun shining off the lake, kids laughing like it's the only sound that matters, smoke drifting out of the chimney for no reason but comfort. We were standing in the yard, Chris flipping burgers, the boys seeing who could catch the ugliest bluegill when I heard the sound. Tires on gravel, fast, aggressive, like someone late to a fire they set themselves. I turned, and there it was, a big black SUV barreling down the path toward my gate, kicking up dust like it was chasing something. I already knew. Before the doors even opened, I knew. The SUV skidded to a stop just shy of the tree line. 3 people climbed out. Karen front and center, of course, wearing her stupid Cedar Ridge HOA vest like it was a badge of honor. Behind her, 2 of her little cronies, middle-aged men who looked like they had nothing better to do than follow her around with clipboards and confusion. She marched straight up toward us and didn't even pretend to smile. "You're trespassing," she barked, skipping past any sort of greeting or pretense. "This property is under HOA review, and you are in direct violation." Chris took a step forward, trying to reason with her, but I held up a hand. I didn't want him caught up in this. This was my war, not his. "Karen," I said calmly, "you're mistaken. This cabin isn't under your jurisdiction." "I've already called the sheriff," she snapped like that was supposed to scare me. "Let them settle it." And then she turned on her heel and stormed back toward the SUV, looking like she'd just dropped the mic. I didn't say a word, just walked back up to the porch, poured myself a glass of sweet tea, and waited. And wait I did. 20 minutes later, 3 sheriff cars rolled down the path in formation, like they were planning a raid. Lights flashing, tires crunching, radios crackling. One deputy stepped out, young guy, barely older than my oldest grandson, with a hand resting just a little too eagerly on his holster. He looked at me and said real firm, "Sir, I need you to step outside. The HOA president filed a trespassing complaint. Karen stood behind him, arms crossed, lips tight, like she was about to take a victory lap. I didn't stand up, didn't move a muscle, I just looked him square in the eye and said, "You might want to call your supervisor. Or better yet, the county commissioner. This cabin? This land? It's mine. The whole county line, in fact." His eyebrow twitched. Karen's face faltered for half a second, but she recovered fast. "What did you just say?" she hissed. I just smiled and took another sip of tea. Then his radio buzzed. He stepped away to talk to dispatch, and I could see the change happen in real time. His stance softened. The color in his face changed. He walked back, slower this time. "Are you Arthur Bennett?" I nodded. "Well, the records show you own over 800 acres, including this property and the land surrounding Cedar Ridge." Karen went pale. But I wasn't even close to done. The very next morning, before the sun was even up, I heard something clinking out by the gate. First, I thought it was a raccoon getting into the trash, but then I saw the shape. Karen, back again, with bolt cutters in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She was padlocking my own damn gate shut from the outside like she was foreclosing on me. I opened the front door and shouted, "Karen, what the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned with a plastic smile like she was doing a ribbon-cutting ceremony. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. Per HOA Ordinance 22 B, your property has been restricted due to non-compliance with visual code and unauthorized use of community access roads." "There is no Ordinance 22 B, and this isn't your property," I shot back. She didn't even blink. "The board voted unanimously last night. Your appeal window is closed. You're in violation, Arthur. The gate is locked for everyone's safety." "You locked a man in his own home." She actually laughed. "Call someone if you think you can prove you're allowed to be here. Good luck with that." Then she turned and walked off like she was proud of herself. And that was the moment I realized she wasn't just posturing anymore. She wasn't fishing for a reaction. She was going for control, total control, and she didn't care what laws she had to break to get it. I waited until she drove off, then went back inside, poured myself another cup of coffee, and pulled the file I kept tucked in the drawer under the bookshelf. Inside were every deed, plat, zoning document, and tax record for every inch of those 800 acres. The whole history, stitched together one parcel at a time, over 2 decades. And just like that, the war officially began. Because up until then, I'd stayed out of it. I didn't argue, I didn't push back. But locking me on my own land? That was her crossing the line. Now it was my turn. I wasn't looking to go to war with anybody, not even Karen. I mean that. Even after the padlock stunt, I was still willing to chalk it up to desperation or ego, or whatever cocktail of control and crazy was fueling her. I figured maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to settle things like adults. Quietly, with facts. So I started with the obvious. I called Ellie Granger, my attorney. I've known her for years. Smart as a whip, cool as a stone under pressure. She handled the original land acquisitions when I started buying up the parcels around the lake, so if anyone knew how clean my paperwork was, it was her. When I told her what happened, she didn't even hesitate. "Want me to bury them in filings?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let's give them one last chance to come to their senses." So we drafted a formal cease and desist, short, sharp, and full of the kind of legal language that makes HOA board members sweat through their polos. It laid everything out, that I was not and never had been part of their HOA, that I held clear title to all adjacent properties, and that any further trespassing or enforcement attempts would be met with civil and criminal consequences. Ellie filed it with the county and sent certified copies to the HOA board, their management company, and Karen personally. Then we waited. No response, not a call, not a letter, not even a passive-aggressive email. I reached out to Roger, the county commissioner, good guy, old friend. We used to play poker every Thursday before his schedule got hijacked by county meetings and public events. I told him what was happening. He knew about Cedar Ridge, knew about Karen, and the kind of games she liked to play. He sighed hard into the phone when I explained the padlock. "I can't believe she actually locked you in," he said. "She did, and she did it wearing an HOA vest like she was Homeland Security. Roger promised to look into it, said he'd speak to the zoning office, double-check the maps, and see what kind of leash the HOA had legally. But he warned me too. If they've got friends in the planning board, it could get political fast." That's the thing about these HOAs. They may look like bake sale organizers on the surface, but some of them operate like mini-regimes. And when they get cozy with the right bureaucrats, suddenly the system that's supposed to protect you starts looking the other way. Still, I kept trying. I even drove into town and stopped by the sheriff's office to speak with Cole Pearson. I've known Cole since he was a pimply teenager bagging groceries at the corner market. These days, he wears the badge and keeps the peace, and he's good at it. Fair, no nonsense, not easily pushed around. When I sat down with him and laid out the whole situation, he scratched his head and said, "Let me guess, Karen Langford?" Bingo! She's already filed 3 complaints against you, 1 for unlawful structure, 1 for unsafe terrain, and 1 for disturbing the peace. I blinked. Disturbing the peace? For what, barbecuing with my grandkids? Cole half smiled, shook his head. I wouldn't worry, your paperwork's solid, but just so you know, she's not letting up. He was right. That same week, I got a visit from a man in a dark suit and sunglasses. Showed up at my porch like a damn ghost. Said he was from the Department of Environmental Enforcement. Claimed they'd received a report that I'd illegally diverted lake water into protected wetlands. Now I've walked every inch of my land. There isn't a wetland within shouting distance. The slope behind the cabin is dry as a bone, covered in pine needles and chipmunk holes. But here he was, badge out, clipboard in hand, looking to make it official. I let him inspect. I followed him around with my old Nikon, snapping photos of every single step he took. If Karen thought I was going to panic and fold, she didn't know me at all. When the agent left, he didn't look too happy, didn't find a damn thing. Promised to file the report as inconclusive. I told him to make sure he included the part where the complaint was a lie. I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. He gave me a look like he already knew. You'd think that would be enough for her. That maybe, just maybe, a federal agency showing up empty-handed would make her take a breath. But no. Next came the IRS. Yeah, the actual IRS. Another guy in another suit shows up with a folder under his arm and a face like a funeral director. Says he's there to review financial filings related to my land holdings. Said someone filed a report claiming I'd been hiding assets or misreporting land values. The folder had my name, my land titles, and a copy of a sale I made 4 years ago for a forestry easement to the state. It was all clean. I pulled out the receipts, the original state contract, the tax filings, everything. He flipped through them slowly, then looked up at me and said, "Well, I don't see any inconsistencies." I stared at him. "You know who filed this, don't you?" He didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward the tree line. I knew who was out there. Watching. Karen Langford. At that point, I was tired. Not angry, not scared, just tired. I'd tried doing it the right way. I'd followed every process, made every call, filed every letter. I'd played by the rules and stayed within the lines. And she just kept finding ways to redraw them. I remember sitting on the porch that night, watching the lake go silver under the moonlight, wondering how the hell I got here. How a man who just wanted some quiet ended up with federal agents on his doorstep and warning notices on his gate. I wasn't ready to give up. But for the first time, I understood something that pissed me off more than all the letters and all the visits combined. She didn't care about the law. She didn't care about right and wrong. She just wanted to win. And that meant I had to stop trying to reason with someone who had no interest in truth. It was time to stop defending. Time to start planning. The fire didn't start big. Just a hiss at first. A flicker behind the tree line near the ridge that fed into the access road. I almost missed it. I was on the porch, fixing the hinges on the screen door, when I caught that faint orange glow out of the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was sunset bouncing off something, maybe taillights, but then the wind shifted and I smelled it. Burning plastic. That kind of smell hits different. It's not like wood smoke or a campfire. It's sharper, more chemical. It smells like something going wrong, and when I rounded the cabin and saw the flames licking up from the pile of old brush and lumber I'd stacked near the gate, my stomach dropped. I ran to grab the extinguisher. By the time I got back, the side of the gate was lit up like a bonfire, paint bubbling and wood blackening fast. I managed to kill the flames, but the smoke was thick and heavy, crawling up my throat and stinging my eyes. It wasn't natural. Not lightning, not an accident. Someone said it. And that was the moment the whole thing turned. That was the second I knew this wasn't about ordinances or control or Karen flexing her HOA muscles anymore. It had gone beyond letters and warnings, beyond fake violations and federal complaints. This was sabotage, and whoever lit that fire wanted it to send a message. I didn't sleep that night, sat in the living room with the lights off, rifle across my lap, just watching the trees. Waiting. Listening for tires or footsteps or that faint mechanical whine of another drone. But nothing came. The next morning, I went out to inspect the damage. It wasn't random. The flames had been set right on top of the buried conduit line that ran power from my solar backup unit to the gate sensor. Burned clean through. They knew what they were doing. I followed the tracks out to where the brush met the main path and found fresh tire marks. Not from my truck. Smaller, like a compact SUV. Someone had pulled in, torched it, and slipped away under cover of trees. I pulled the security footage, but the camera near the gate had been tampered with. Unplugged, not yanked out or smashed, just quietly disabled, clean and deliberate. Thing is, I had backups. 2 other cameras hidden in trees, placed there months ago when the violations started piling up. Different angles, no blinking lights, one pointing straight at the access road. I loaded up the memory card and started scrubbing through the footage, and there she was, Karen, wearing dark jeans, a hoodie pulled tight around her head, stepping out of the passenger side of a black crossover with no plates. She didn't light it herself. That was the man with her. Bigger guy, buzz cut, leather gloves. He poured something from a red can, then sparked it with a long lighter. Karen just stood there, watched it burn, and then she smiled. Not some cartoon villain grin. It was subtle, satisfied, like she'd finally won. They were gone in under 90 seconds. I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding, skin cold. I replayed it 3, maybe 4 times, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that maybe it wasn't her, that maybe it was someone who looked like her. But it was her. And now it wasn't just harassment. It was a crime. I copied the footage to a second drive and drove it straight to Ellie's office. I didn't call, didn't text, just showed up and walked in like a man delivering evidence to the FBI. When she saw the video, she didn't say a word, just reached into her drawer, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and started making notes. Legal notes, criminal notes. Arson, intent to destroy property, possibly endangerment. If we can tie her to the vehicle, we've got conspiracy. She was calm. I wasn't. Because here's the kicker. When I went back through the footage again, frame by frame, I spotted something else. A decal on the guy's jacket, tiny but clear enough in the right light, not military, not corporate. Private security. That son of a bitch wasn't just some friend of hers, she'd hired someone, and not just any someone. I recognized the patch. It belonged to a security outfit out of Macon. I'd seen it before when they showed up at a local development site years ago. Expensive, discreet. They didn't show up to handle barking dogs or noisy teens. They handled problems, which meant she saw me as one. Ellie leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. She's escalating because she thinks she's above the law. If we hit her now, we can go public, press charges, maybe even open a RICO case if this is part of a bigger HOA racket. I didn't answer, because somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. This wasn't about Cedar Ridge anymore. This wasn't about appearance codes or jurisdiction lines or even the damn gate. This was about me. And Karen was willing to burn my world down just to prove she could. But she'd made a mistake. She thought she was the only one who knew how to set fires. And she had no idea what I'd been preparing all this time. I'll tell you something about landowners, real ones. The kind who've spent half their life knee-deep in dirt, sorting through plats and survey markers instead of reading bylaws written by retirees on a power trip. We don't scream, we don't make scenes, we build foundations. Quiet, solid, permanent. And I'd been building mine for 20 years without even knowing it. The morning after Ellie saw the footage, I drove back to the cabin with the kind of calm that only comes when the worst has already happened. The gate was still scorched, the scent of melted wire still clinging to the breeze, but something in me had changed. That line I kept trying not to cross, the one between defending and fighting, was behind me now, and it was shrinking in the rear view. Karen thought she'd set the tempo, that I was always going to be 2 beats behind, stumbling while she danced circles in her little HOA vest. But she didn't know what I'd spent the last few years doing between fishing trips and fixing the septic. See, while she was busy building her little empire of mulch and mulch violations, I'd been consolidating. Quietly, deliberately, and not just land. I'd been working with Roger, the county commissioner, helping him secure matching grants for infrastructure improvement out here. Roads, broadband lines, emergency services coverage, all routed through land I owned. I wasn't just a landowner, I was the damn bottleneck. And that mattered more than she knew. So I gotta work. First call I made was to Ellie, obviously. We'd need legal teeth, real ones. Not just cease and desist letters, but a coordinated civil suit. Arson, conspiracy, harassment, defamation, unlawful trespass, property damage. She started lining it all up, said she'd file preliminary motions while I gathered more evidence. But we both knew legal process took time. I needed something else, something faster. I needed to pull every thread Karen had been weaving and unravel it right in her smug little face. That meant digging. I called a buddy of mine, Dean Walters, retired CPA, but a bloodhound when it came to numbers. He owed me a favor from back when I helped him fight off a crooked timber rights scheme. I told him what I needed, every scrap of financial data on Cedar Ridge HOA going back 5 years. Vendor payments, reserve accounts, discretionary spending, and anything with Karen's name on it. Dean didn't even ask why. 2 weeks later, I had a folder so thick it needed its own seatbelt, and it stunk. There were multiple payments to companies that didn't exist outside of a P.O. box. Landscaping bills from a contractor who hadn't filed taxes in a decade. Reimbursement requests for community outreach lunches that cost more than a wedding rehearsal dinner, and all of it signed off by Karen, sometimes even by her husband, who, surprise, surprise, happened to be the consultant behind their HOA Security Enhancement Fund. It was enough to get the state's Department of Consumer Affairs sniffing around. Ellie agreed. She prepped a complaint packet and scheduled a meeting with the regional rep. While that was cooking, I started reinforcing my side. I talked to every landowner adjacent to Cedar Ridge, folks I'd bought from, folks I shared a fence with, and let me tell you, Karen had burned a lot of bridges. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd tried to intimidate. I found 2 families who sold to me specifically to get away from her board's harassment. They weren't just willing to talk, they were ready to testify. But I needed more than stories. I needed to make it undeniable. I started documenting everything. Not just the fire, not just the drone flyovers or the letters. I tracked every movement. I installed new trail cams, recorded every car that came down the road. I cataloged their visits, their quotes, even the day Karen's little muscle from Macon SUV showed up again and parked just outside the tree line. He didn't get out this time. Just sat there for a good hour and a half, watching. I waved at him with a sandwich in one hand and my camera in the other. By then, even the sheriff's department had started backing off. Cole told me off the record that Karen's repeated calls were starting to raise eyebrows, especially since they all came with these panicked tones about an armed squatter and militia activity. It was all unraveling, quietly but fast. But the moment I knew I had her, really had her, was when I found the original incorporation paperwork for Cedar Ridge HOA. See, most folks don't know how these things work. They think an HOA is some God-given authority that rains fines and mulch regulations from the heavens. But no, it's a corporation, a private entity, and like any corporation, it's subject to the rules of the state and the limits of its own founding documents. And buried in that filing, plain as day, was a clause. One line, just 13 words. Jurisdiction is limited to parcels recorded under the Cedar Ridge Master Plat, Phase 1. That was it. Phase 1. Not Phase 2. Not surrounding parcels. Not any property touching community assets. Just Phase 1. And guess what wasn't in Phase 1? My land. Any of it. Not one damn square foot. It was over. They had no legal authority. None. Everything Karen had done, from the first letter to the padlock to the fake complaints and the drone harassment and the literal arson, was all done under the false pretense of jurisdiction she never legally had. She'd built her empire on a foundation of make-believe, and now it was time to bulldoze it. Ellie drew up the final documents. Dean organized the financial exhibits. The neighbors wrote their statements. And me? I started preparing something a little more old school, something public, something no HOA president can hide from. And if Karen thought the fire was the climax, she hadn't seen anything yet. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but honestly, mine was damn near freezing. I wasn't looking to make a scene, I wanted a reckoning. Quiet, surgical, but undeniable. Something that wouldn't just stop Karen, it would collapse everything she built on top of me. The first move was Ellie filing the lawsuit, and we didn't hold back. 38 pages. Arson, criminal trespass, malicious harassment, fraud, defamation, abuse of authority, and more. Backed with every video, affidavit, financial document, and drone snapshot I had. Every violation she tried to throw at me? Turned back on her, one by one. Ellie had it wrapped up with a bow, filed in county and served right at the HOA's board meeting. Right in the middle of their monthly circle jerk about which fences were too blue or which mailboxes looked unwholesome, Karen opened the manila envelope and read her own obituary. Her face, I'm told, went full chalk. But that was just the beginning. I'd planned something else, something very specific, something she couldn't spin or sweep under the rug. See, I wasn't just a landowner. Remember that broadband expansion I helped Roger push through? Turns out I'd become a registered partner in the project for logistical support. That made me eligible to host the quarterly Community Infrastructure and Development Forum, a meeting that pulled together local leaders, landowners, zoning officials, and county board members, usually dry as toast, but not this one. I reserved the community hall, ironically the same one Cedar Ridge used for HOA meetings, and I invited everyone. Open invitation, advertised in town, in the paper, even through the Chamber of Commerce's newsletter. The agenda? Updates on regional infrastructure, land jurisdiction, and community safety. Oh, and one tiny detail, the session would be recorded and live streamed. I didn't call it a public trial, but it damn well felt like one. That morning, I wore jeans and a work shirt. Nothing flashy, just a guy who looked like he'd stepped off a ladder. I brought a folder, thick, full of highlighted records, and a flash drive. Roger was there, Ellie too, and so were dozens of neighbors, landowners, even a few folks who came just to see what the buzz was about. Karen showed up late. She walked in like a lawyer in a made-for-TV courtroom with 2 HOA board members trailing behind her like lost sheep. She looked around, realized the cameras were rolling, and stiffened up like a board. I got up to speak during the land rights and jurisdiction segment. I kept it calm, measured, started with a history of my property, how it was built before Cedar Ridge even existed, how it had never been part of their HOA, how their Phase 1 plat ended well short of my acreage. I played the drone footage, showed the fire damage, then I dropped the security cam clip. The room went silent. Then I presented the tax fraud records, payments to non-existent vendors, board-authorized reimbursements for private travel, payments to Karen's husband's fake consulting firm. You could feel the shift in the room. All those polite nods and small-town smiles started curdling into something else, disgust mostly, some shock, a whole lot of whispered curses. Then Ellie stepped up and read a statement from one of the former HOA treasurers, an older woman who'd resigned quietly 2 years ago. Her letter said she left because Karen pressured her to adjust numbers during an audit to cover up overdrawn accounts, that she was told to sign things without asking questions, and that she feared retaliation. By the time we wrapped, Karen looked like a busted electrical panel, sparking inside but no lights on the outside. Her cronies were shrinking into their folding chairs, but they still had one play left, one pathetic last-ditch spin. Karen stood up and said, "All of this is being twisted. This is a smear campaign by someone who's trying to destabilize our community and profit from it." That's when I smiled. Because remember that security outfit her goon belonged to? I'd contacted their corporate office, told them what happened, sent them the footage. They terminated his contract the same day. And they sent me a notarized statement disavowing any connection to Cedar Ridge or Karen. Said the agent acted outside of any authorized engagement and that they'd be cooperating with legal authorities. I handed that statement to the moderator, loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen sat down. Hard. A week later, Cole called me. They were opening an investigation, not just for the fire, but the financial stuff too. And if even half of it stuck, Karen wasn't just going to lose her little kingdom. She might actually see the inside of a courtroom that didn't have free coffee and folding chairs. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Not public this time. But word gets around fast in a small town. Karen didn't show. She resigned for health reasons the next morning. The 2 board members who backed her, they stepped down too. New elections were called. And guess who got asked to help write the new oversight protocols? Yeah, me, the guy who just wanted to be left alone to fish and sip coffee on his porch. I didn't take the role, but I helped shape the language, built in safeguards, made sure the next Karen couldn't rise without check. Because if there's one thing this mess taught me, it's that power given without oversight always finds a way to rot. But I wasn't done yet, because Karen had left a trail, and it didn't end with my gate. And the best part? Now she had nowhere left to hide. It's funny the way word travels in a small county. You can't so much as repaint your mailbox without the grocery store clerk hearing about it. So when the whole town found out the HOA queen of Cedar Ridge had been caught on camera, orchestrating a fire, lying about property rights, funneling money into her husband's fake consulting gig, and filing bogus complaints with federal agencies, well, it was like someone lit a match in a hayloft. Except this time, it wasn't my land burning. The story broke in the Ledger. Not exactly the Times, but everyone in 3 counties reads it. Front page, local HOA president under fire for alleged arson, financial misconduct. Ellie had helped a reporter piece it all together, sent him the footage, the documents, even a few choice statements from former HOA members who were suddenly more than willing to talk. And then came the broadcast piece. Evening news, slow pan of my scorched gate, B-roll of the lake behind my cabin, a still frame of Karen, hoodie up, staring at a fire she thought no one would ever connect to her. They played the drone footage too, cut right to the moment her hired goon sparked the flame, and she just stood there, watching, smug. Roger, the commissioner, did a brief on-camera segment talking about abuse of power, the need for transparency in private governance, and how Cedar Ridge was a cautionary tale. People ate it up. The local Facebook groups lit up like Vegas. Folks from other neighborhoods chimed in, stories about Karen trying to intimidate them at zoning meetings, spreading rumors about people who didn't agree with her, or fining families for hanging wind chimes that were too reflective. and suddenly nobody wanted to be seen siding with her. The current board threw her under the bus. Fast posted a statement about how they were unaware of any wrongdoing and how the HOA does not condone any form of illegal behavior. It was damage control with all the sincerity of a weatherman apologizing for rain. But the best part? The county finally stepped in. An audit was ordered into the HOA's financial practices, not just Cedar Ridge's current records, but 5 years back. Everything, every check, every contractor, every reimbursement. The Department of Consumer Affairs opened an investigation, and when they found out Karen's husband had been listed as a paid consultant on at least 7 different invoices, things got real spicy. They froze the HOA's reserve account. Froze it. Suddenly the board couldn't pay landscapers, couldn't pay for pool maintenance, couldn't even process refunds for those precious, community-sponsored events Karen loved to host where she raffled off wine baskets to her friends. Homeowners started asking questions, loudly, at town halls, on Nextdoor. One guy even showed up to a board meeting with a printed copy of the original HOA charter and slammed it down on the table, yelling, "You don't own my land, and you never did." They couldn't ignore it anymore. The county filed charges. Karen was officially indicted. Arson, fraud, falsifying documents, misappropriation of funds. There was even talk of attempted coercion based on how she used her role to file complaints and try to ruin reputations. Her lawyer tried to spin it as an unfortunate series of misunderstandings, but the judge didn't seem too convinced. Bail was set. She made it, but the mugshot still made the rounds. And I got a letter, not a threat, not another HOA notice, an apology. Handwritten, from one of the former board members, the same guy who once tried to fine me for unauthorized land use because I parked my trailer facing the wrong direction. He said he didn't know what she was doing, that he'd trusted her, followed her lead, that he didn't want to believe someone could be so obsessed with control they'd risk burning down someone's home to keep it. He asked if there was anything he could do to make things right. I didn't write back. I wasn't mad, really. I just didn't need anything from them anymore. The truth was out. It wasn't just my win, it was a collapse, a slow-motion implosion of a fake little empire that had ruled people through fear and fake authority for too damn long. People started calling the land near my cabin the line, like it was the edge of Karen's kingdom. Her reach had stopped there, and now she was gone. It was fitting. Even the sheriff's deputies started waving again when they passed. Not just a nod, an actual wave. The cameras? Still up, but now they're for peace of mind, not protection. And that old padlock she slapped on my gate? I keep it on a shelf in the shed. Burnt, warped, still half melted. It reminds me of something important. Bullies don't always come with fists. Sometimes they wear polos and hold clipboards. But if you stand your ground long enough, even the biggest ones will eventually overreach. And when they do, that's when you burn down their lies. One truth at a time. The lake's real still now. Mornings, I sit out on the porch with a mug of coffee, watch the mist roll over the water like it's laying down for a nap. Sometimes a heron comes by and lands on the old dock. Just stands there like he owns the place. I get it. I used to feel the same way. It's quiet out here again. No more drive-bys, no more drones humming overhead, no HOA board members pretending to be concerned citizens. Just birds, squirrels, and whatever deer feel like strolling through my back acreage. Peaceful, the way it used to be. I fixed the gate, though I left the scorch marks on the post. A little reminder. Doesn't look too bad, honestly. Adds character. The mailbox? Still leans a little. Thought about straightening it, but then again, maybe it should stay crooked. I like that it's imperfect. Real. Ellie checks in every now and then. Says there's still a couple hearings pending for Karen, but it's mostly a formality at this point. She'll lose her license, maybe do time, maybe not. I don't care either way. I'm not out for blood. I just wanted my damn life back. Karen vanished like smoke after that last court date. House went up for sale not long after. Nobody's moved in yet. Folks say she's living with her sister somewhere downstate, trying to stay out of the public eye. Can't blame her. This town's not quick to forget. Especially when your mugshot ends up laminated and pinned to the corkboard at the local diner under the words "Ho Hell." Roger and I still talk now and then. He invited me to some county thing last week, said they're forming a landowner advisory board. I passed, told him I'm retired from politics. He laughed and said, "You never even ran." I told him that was the smartest part of my campaign. The neighbors are different now too. People wave. They stop and talk. I've had more conversations in the past month than in the 10 years before that. It's like everyone breathed out at once after holding it in too long. Nobody realized just how tense things had gotten under Karen's thumb until it snapped. I think about that sometimes, how something can rot for so long before anyone sees it. That kind of quiet erosion, where folks convince themselves it's normal just because no one's fighting back. I won't lie, there were days I almost gave in. Nights I thought maybe I should just sell the place, move on. I mean, what was I holding on to? An old cabin, a chunk of woods, some memories? But now I know. It wasn't just a property. It was the principle that you shouldn't have to beg to be left alone on your own land. That people like Karen don't get to invent rules just because they love control more than community. And more than that, it taught me something about myself. I always thought I was just a guy who liked quiet. Turns out I'm a little more stubborn than that. Turns out I don't back down easy. And when push comes to burn your gate down level shove, I'll fight harder than anyone expects. Funny how you don't know that until someone makes you prove it. Anyway, the fish are biting again. I've got a line in most mornings. The dog, oh yeah, I got a dog, snoozes on the porch next to me. Found him at the shelter after the dust settled. He's got one ear that doesn't sit right and a bark like a rusty bike chain, but he's loyal as hell and doesn't give a damn about HOA regs. I named him Freedom. Felt fitting.